Okay, it's recording. I've had a number of people ask me how she's doing, and I've said she's getting better. That reminds me of a joke, so let me go ahead and share it. Life is pretty rough, but really, when you think about it, there's only two things you got to worry about. Are you sick or are you healthy? And if you're healthy, you got nothing to worry about. Now, if you're sick, you got two things. Are you getting better or are you getting worse? Now, if you're getting better, you got nothing to worry about. But if you're getting worse, you got two things. Am I going to live or am I going to die? Now, if you're going to live, you got nothing to worry about. But if you're going to die, you got two things. Am I going to heaven or am I going to hell? But if I'm going to heaven, you got nothing to worry about. But if you're going to hell, you got two things. Original, extra crispy. Original or extra crispy. That was my Colonel Sanders joke. Okay, all right. Now you know why I'm not a comedian. All right. Start recording. All right, let's finish up on the last of the English versions. We're now up to the 1970s, 80s. We're finally getting to the point now where we're talking about the Bibles that we see every day in church and in the bookstores and so forth, Bibles that we have access to. In fact, I suspect most people have at least one or two or three copies on their bookshelves at home. So these are the ones that we're familiar with, which raises the question, which ones that I want to use? How do I want to use it? So let's get through the evolution of these versions, and then we could talk about that, which one's best for me. Still in the New Testament. Yeah. Yep. It would be a much, much longer class if I had to do the whole Bible. You can do a whole semester in just the Old Testament. Yeah. All right. The New American Standard Bible, NASB, in 1971 by the Lockman Foundation. We're starting to get teamwork. Prior to this, usually one guy or maybe two guys would do a translation. Now we're starting to realize that if we have a team of a lot of different people with a lot of different points of view, we're going to get a better translation. We're going to get hopefully a little less controversial and more accurate translation. So the NASB, which is the one that I use if I'm going to do a Bible study, if I'm going to get down into the Greek and all that sort of stuff, I use the NASB. So 58 translators from many denominations, took 10 years, and they set out to update the ASV, but they ended up being a rewrite. But it incorporates the newest of the source documents. Let me just say a word about those source documents. You've heard me speak about the TR, the Textus Receptus, and the codexes, the original books that were written in Greek. Up until this point, somebody going to translate the Bible would pick one of these. The New King James Version was the Textus Receptus. And so if there was problems in it, there was problems in the Bible. What they're starting to do now is look at all of the versions in the Greek to try to come up with a better translation of the entire Greek, because some Greek copies are worse than others. So what happened was, in the process of doing the NASB, they went through and looked at all the documents they had available at that time. We're talking 5,000 or more, 5,500 or more copies of the original Greek New Testament. And in the process, they came up with 880 marginal notes that reflects the difference between the Textus Receptus and the newer sources. And this group of folks created what was known as the NU Bible. That's the Nestle Aland Novum Testamentum, and the U is the United Bible Society. So those groups came together and researched all of them, pulled together all the codexes, pulled together all the parchments and so forth, and did those tests like I showed you about if it's missing character here and correct character over here and 7 say this, one says that. They did this for everything, and they come up with what's now known as the NU Greek. And so most of the books that we see today are the New Testament is going to be built upon the NU, the Nestle Almond United Bible Society. The New King James Version, under the direction of Sam Moore of the Thomas Nelson Bible Company, was released in 1979, and the Old Testament in 82. So here we are in the 70s, and what we're getting is the NASB and the New King James. The original King James goes all the way back to 1611. All right. In an effort to make the Bible more readable for folks that are not Bible scholars, this guy by the name of Ken Taylor, he creates essentially what's called the Living Bible. And he was frustrated trying to teach his kids from the Bible. If you sit down and try, I have a hard time reading the King James Version anyway, but you imagine how terrible it is to try to teach Bible stories to a child using a King James Version with descriptions of words and stuff that aren't even around today. So what he did was he tried to translate the Bible into what's called paraphrase form. So the NASB and ESV, those are translations that try to follow word for word what's happening. Over on the other side, you have paraphrase. Rather than saying what the sentence actually is, he asked the question, well, if I wanted to tell this to my 10-year-old child today, how would I tell the story? And I would paraphrase that into something that the child would understand. Okay, and so this is the paraphrase form. So this is a good way to read stuff for people who aren't very strong readers. But obviously the downside is you can't go in there and start doing Greek word study when you've got most of the new words in there that you put there. So he rewrote the whole Bible by 71. He had the entire Bible, the Living Bible. This Bible was then picked up by Billy Graham and offered in his TV programs. So when you watch Billy Graham on television, pick up the phone, you call us, and we'll send you a Bible. This is the Bible that was coming out to you. And basically he picked this Bible because anybody can read it. I mean, he could hand this out to kids, teenagers, young adults, and grandma, everybody in between. In the process, he sold 9 million copies. 9 million copies of a Bible, even by today's standard, is pretty good. Okay, 9 million copies is pretty good. And by 1974, it accounted for 46% of the Bible sales in the U.S. This was a very popular book in the early 70s. The New Living Translation, so this is the Living Bible, a New Living Translation was an effort to get something not quite over the paraphrase, but certainly not word for word, something in the middle, okay? So that an adult could read it and not have to look for the pictures of little animals, okay? And, but it still had enough closeness to the word for word so that an adult could interpret it a little bit better. This NLT, New Living Translation, they started it in 89, finished it in 96. And they moved from a phrase to phrase to a thought by thought translation. It's in the middle, the most accurate word for word, paraphrase, and in the middle comes thought for thought. Okay, it's trying to be a little bit more literal to exactly what the sentence says, what the words mean. It's not like telling a story around the campfire to your kids at night. Okay for an average person to read it, but again, it's not the Bible you want to do a Bible study on. And the New Testament of the NLT and the Living Bible are sourced from the NU Greek. So now we've at least got all of the Bibles that we're currently seeing. They're not going to old manuscripts and old Greek parchment. They're going to this NU Greek. So at least everybody has the advantage of having 5,700 copies of the early and the Greek. We're all benefiting from that information. And then in March 2014, now the New Living Translation is the second most popular Bible in unit sales. So Billy Graham really pushed the Living Bible within a matter of maybe, 10, 15 years, 20 years. It starts switching over to a down the middle of the road Bible as being the most popular. All right, now we're looking at the NIV. The NIV is probably the Bible that most of us, at least in my area, most of us grew up on. If I was in a Methodist church growing up, I was not in the Church of Christ, so we didn't use the King James Version. Most of the denominations back when I was growing up, the NIV was the Bible, and the NIV tried to go down the middle of the road and use as much as possible the translation of the words correctly, but to take those words after they were translated and move them into current language vernacular. Right? That means, like, if a word, here's an example. In Genesis, it says we're supposed to leave our parents and cleft unto our spouse. What does the word cleft mean? Anyway.
Would you repeat that?
In Genesis, it says we are to cleft unto our spouse, or unto our wife. In Genesis, what does the word cleft mean? Or clean. Okay. It means to cleave means to come together, right? Then it did back then. Today, what does the word cleave mean? The exact opposite. What's a meat cleaver? Okay? A meat cleaver cuts it in half. What is a cloven hoofed animal, like a cow? 2 toes, split in half. Okay? So here's an example of a word that has completely opposite today as when it was originally written. And the NIV team is working at getting that sort of stuff out of there, so they don't have to explain as you're reading it. Oh, no. Cleave means to put together, not pull apart. So that's the sort of thing they're shooting for. Most of the evangelical churches, were uncomfortable with the readable versions because the evangelical churches, again, I was Methodist, which is almost Catholic actually, but the Protestants, Lutherans, Baptists, the evangelical churches, they are more out there in the evangelizing field. They're out there talking to people, and they're the ones that are getting the question, well, what does that mean? What does that mean? So they needed something that was a little easier to understand what it really meant, even though it doesn't read as nice. That word then meant this, but now it means this. Okay, I'm a Christian apologist. And they're saying, why are you apologizing for being a Christian? I'm not apologizing for being a Christian, but in 1 Peter 3:15 it says, we are to give reason for the hope that is within us with meekness and gentleness. And the word reason in Greek is apologia. And yeah, it was originally the root of the word apology. But today, well, back then it meant to give a reason, give evidence, give facts, give logic. Today, apology has a negative connotation. If you're apologizing, you're assumed to have been wrong. Okay, so there's an example of how do we get the readable versions that still have the ability to be interpreted correctly.
So the apologist,
Yeah.
Does that mean you've got more learning or more anything than the natural run of the mill?
I've got lots of learning, but it's all in
But
science.
I mean,
I'm a scientist.
Do you have to have certain standards?
No. All right, so on one side of the scale, you've got the Bible scholar. The guy's got a PhD in theology, and he's memorized 3 versions of the Bible. He can speak Greek and all that sort of stuff. On the other side, And then this is the technical get down and know exactly what it says. On the other end of this continuum, you've got a preacher. And now the preacher's got a lot of that ability, but what his job is to not tell you what it says. His job is to tell you how to do this and get saved. Okay, and that's his job. I am in the middle. So what it means is I've got to understand what the Bible is saying, what the words mean, get the evidence, and then put the evidence out there for you to make a decision. So, and that frustrates a lot of people because they ask me a question. I've just, the last week or so, I've been on Facebook for hours and hours doing a study with people asking about, well, do I need to be baptized? And there's a good hot issue. Do I need to be baptized, or can I just say the sinner's prayer and get in? Exactly. Yeah. So basically, what I will do is I'm not gonna, if pushed, I will give you my opinion. But when I'm teaching a class, I'm not going to say do this or do that. I'm going to say here's the evidence for, here's the evidence against. This is good because of. This is good because of. It's bad. You decide. So it's your decision. Yeah, and that's what the apologist does in the middle. Okay. All right. So in '67, the New York International Bible Society agreed to fork up the bucks to do the translation, and this is what they're getting to now in order to have a version that people can say is not biased towards any one particular group. Theological and denominational biases were minimal to the makeup of the team. They had 34 groups representing Anglican, Assembly of God, Baptist, Brethren, Christian Reformed, Church of Christ, Episcopal, Evangelical Free, Lutheran Mennonite, Methodist Nazarene, Presbyterian, and Wesleyan Methodist. With that group, you've got just about every opinion out there except Mormon. Okay, that's about the only group that has something to do with Jesus that was not on there. And these groups they literally had teams that had to get agreement on stuff. You've heard me say this before. Back in the original Greek and the original Hebrew, each word could have several different meanings. And this group may like this translation, that one. So they fought these battles. And if it got close, they put this in the translation and they put a footnote, also referred to as, and they tell you what else it could be down the bottom. They had a total of 110 evangelical translators in 20 different teams, an intermediate editorial committee that would review comparisons between the 20 teams, a general editorial committee, a 15-member executive editorial committee. And this is just to come up with the translation. And then they sent it off to a team of literary consultants to make sure it made a good book, read like a good book. Okay? But when you put this kind of effort, you see why they need to raise money to do the translation. But the NIV, it's built on relatively solid ground. The first version, NIV has been translated twice, and there's a recent version which is called the gender neutral version. And there may be some question about that one. All right. The Old Testament was based on the Biblia Hebraica. Remember I said on some of the earlier ones, they used the Masoretic text and the Septuagint. The same process was happening in the Hebrew, pulling together all the documents. And they tried to make a best new version based on all the data they had. Between the original Masoretic text and today, what single biggest find helped them understand the Hebrew Old Testament? The Dead Sea Scrolls. The Dead Sea Scrolls. That was like winning the lottery. So when the original Hebrew writing plus the Dead Sea Scrolls plus all the other copies that they had, now we've got a good solid Hebrew Old Testament foundation called the Biblia Hebraica. And the New Testament was translated on the NU, the Eclectic Greek. And the goal was to bridge a gap between the word for word and a dynamic equivalent translation I'll explain that one in a few minutes. All right. Oh, yeah, all right. This is an example of what I was just talking about. In Greek or Hebrew, they didn't have as many words, okay? In the Greek language back around Christ's time, there would be maybe 5,000 or maybe 5,500 lexical words, okay? That means base words, not all the present tense or future, masculine, feminine, just the base word itself. And in Hebrew, even less, like maybe 2,000 or 3,000. But there's still as many things you got to talk about as we have today. Well, not really, but so what happens is each word ends up having to have 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 different meanings. All right. Example here: the word see, S-E-E. That word see can be used in a visual sense. I see that bottle sitting there. Visit. I'm going to see my friends. Yeah, we could possibly see that happen. A possible act. I'm going to see that gets done. There's your act. I finally see the light. Understanding. Okay. So a single word in English, which by the way, I was saying 5,000 Greek, 2,000 Hebrew. You know how many words we have in the English dictionary? About 174,000 in the base dictionary. When you add scientific terminology, it goes over 1 million. Okay? The average person today, if you're just talking about someone that graduates from high school, the average person today is going to use about 30,000 words. Or at least they could understand it. They can watch television and understand it. They may only use 10, 50 words, a very small vocabulary, but they will understand about 30,000 words. That's 6 times as many total words that they had back then. Okay? Hello? Yeah.
Where does Aramaic come in?
Okay.
Jesus was Hebrew,
Yeah.
correct?
Yeah. This goes way back.
Do we know if he spoke Greek or Aramaic?
All of the above. All of the above. There's a group called the Akkadian languages, and this goes all the way back to the Mesopotamian times, prior to anything in the Bible. This is was that king back there, and I can't remember his name now.
Okay, there's a sect of people that live in Louisiana. They're really Cajuns, but what you were saying.
Yeah, the group that I'm trying to think of, it's a group that wrote a lot of stuff before Moses wrote the Torah. Okay, and I'll think of it when I'll pop it up. But this goes back to what today in Iraq, what's that, Baghdad and any of those countries, this was a whole kingdom, and they spoke in a language variation called Arcadia, which is the root of Aramaic. So the Aramaic language was spread really wide all around the biblical area, and they can trace some of the Hebrew coming back up from the Aramaic. So in Jesus' time, he actually probably spoke 3 or 4 languages. He could speak as many as he wanted, okay? But comfortably, he could deal with his family and friends in Aramaic. That's the language you learn growing up, okay? When he went into the temple, he can speak Hebrew, okay? And when you're out on the street meeting travelers from one village to the next, you're speaking Greek. Yeah. You know what person speaks 3 languages. They call it trilingual. Person that speaks 2 languages is called bilingual. Person that speaks 1 is called American. All right. Now we're up to, here's an example of the differences in the way these words come up. The ASV, in Mark 12:27, he is not the God of the dead, but of the living ye do greatly err. Okay? Along comes the NIV. He is not the God of the dead, but of the living. You are badly mistaken. And then in the New Living Translation, So he's the God of the living, not the dead. You have made a serious error. You see how it kind of paraphrases now? Okay. The word error, the word serious, in the Greek doesn't look at all like what the Greek says. This is someone else's helping you understand it by changing up the words that you're comfortable with. Today, the NIV is the top selling Bible. However, it changes literally year to year. I've got a chart that shows well, here they are right here. Okay. All right. So the NIV today is the most popular selling version. And in the bracket, the first bracket is number one. The numbers today are 2021. The number one is back to the 2011 rankings. It was still the number one version back in 2011. But now, as of 25, it's dropped down to the number two. The King James Version was number two back in 2021, number two back in 2011, but now, literally this month, it's back up to number one again. Recent numbers, it's back up to number one again. The King James Version. I have a guess as to why, but we'll get to that in a minute. The New Living Translation was number three, then four, and still four. The ESV, the ones that we use here, the English Standard Version, back in 2020, in 2021, it was number four, then it dropped to five, and now it's up to three. And the New King James Version is hung in at three.
You know, when Derek came to this congregation, he had us all to go get the ESV.
Yeah.
That's what he preferred.
Yeah. I've got a chart that shows how they look. And all of my research, when I'm diving into the guts, I'm either using the NASB or the ESV because they're word for word. I can do Greek down there. I'll show it to you. But if I want a quote out of a verse of a Bible that I'm going to put in a slide like this, that I'm going to teach to a mixed audience of anybody from kids to adults, I usually use the NLT, New Living Translation, because that is the one that hits the average person in the United States eyeball. That's about the level, NLT. All right, so the NIV became the conservative evangelical standard Bible, replacing the King James Version, except for very recently, and I'm talking like less than a year, maybe within the last 6 months, King James has come back up to the top. It's almost like there's a revival out there. Have you seen it? You feel it? The kids and the Charlie Kirk thing, you can almost feel it coming back up again. I'm seeing pictures on television of out in whole places in California, 15 or 20 or 30 or 50 kids getting together and going down to the beach and baptizing them in the Pacific Ocean. And they all buy a Bible and join the church. And they're buying the King James Version.
Do you think it's possible?
The statistics I'm looking at, I use an AI to ask me these questions. Another side note, gotta be careful with AI, all right? I don't know how anybody here uses it, but I'm using it quite a lot. AI like ChatGPT, IOX, Copilot, these are the AIs that use what's called a large language model. And the large language model for those looks like the internet, okay? And if you can't believe the internet, you really gotta ask questions about what some AI is telling you. I use an AI called Claude, C-L-A-U-D-E, Claude.com. And Claude has a rich collection of Bibles. It has all the other stuff, but it also has Bible stuff. And I have yet to find any question that I asked Claude that has come back with an answer that I can't justify in the Greek. It may do it one day, but it hasn't done it yet. So anytime I'm doing AI work, and that's where I get these numbers from. I use Claude,
How do you get into this AI?
CLAUDE.com. Enter.
You mean
I just go to the URL.
you just type it in?
Yeah, I didn't even type it in. I
I
type.
don't want to. I don't
No,
want to get into it.
Anybody that uses a browser like Edge or any of the browsers, you go up to the top line called the URL line, Universal Resource Locator. You type in CLAUDE.com, hit the enter key, and you're in the program. And then it has a place where you put your question, and next to it is a little microphone. If you click on the microphone, you ask the question out loud to your laptop. It types itself in, hit the enter key, and comes back. And you can ask a question like, give me all of the examples where the Holy Spirit is active in the New Testament. Summarize it down to 5 pages, 500 words. And like 10 seconds later, it's there. Awesome. Awesome. AI is not going to replace anybody's job. What will is those that can use AI will have their jobs. Those that choose not to use AI are in trouble.
They still say not to use it to write your resume. I know we're getting off track.
Yeah, it's okay. Yeah, no, that's you could. But yeah,
I'm scared of it.
so how do we get around that? I put these videos on my YouTube channel. Okay, so tomorrow late, this tonight will be on the YouTube channel.
You are recording now, aren't you?
I hope so. I certainly hope so. I think I went square. Yes, I'm square. I put this up on the YouTube channel, and I have to upload the video from my phone to my laptop. On my laptop, I then upload it to the YouTube channel. And the average 45, 50-minute class takes about half an hour or so to load. And then it takes about 2 hours to validate. It's going through and checking for copyright violations. They have a huge, huge algorithm that literally knows everything everywhere all the time. And it's going to, hey, you said that word for word right out of this book written 10 years ago. And I get a little report at the end. I'm sweating until it says you're clear. Okay. So yeah, it's amazing what they do with these things. Good rabbit hole. I enjoy rabbit holes. Okay. Yeah, in the 2011 version of the NIV, the owners of the NIV succumbed to public pressure and political correctness. And they went in and rewrote the NIV to be gender neutral. And basically, anything that could offend anybody, they de-offended it. Okay, they watered it down. So where it says men did this or women did that, it's like they. They use the right pronouns. As soon as they released this back in 2011, the sales of the NIV started going down. I have both of them, but I don't use the new one. All right. Last one. This is the one where we use now, ESV. So in 1998, and this brings us right up to date, Crossway obtained the rights to update the RSV, okay, with the goal of ESV as a translation that adheres to an essentially literal translation philosophy, only taking into account differences in grammar, syntax, and idiom. Grammar would be like the cleave means half, means double. Syntax would be like your nouns and verbs and so forth. So it would go through that example of the CSEE and said, well, this is a noun, and I need this noun in the accusative form, third person singular, and bring in that version of the translation. Idiom. We have some strange idioms. We have some, well, they're basically just sayings that we understand, but it makes no sense to anybody else. Okay. They got rid of that stuff, and then the rest of it is word for word right back to the NU Greek. So the ESV is the one that I go to do my English translation of the Greek.
I never realized that. You're saying that we can't go by the Revised Standard Version now unless
Oh
it's
yeah,
an older copy.
yeah. No, I've got it. I have like I think 16 Bibles on my phone.
I guess I'm misunderstanding. Saying it used the RSV. It used it, but you can still buy the RSV.
The translating committee had to purchase the rights to the RSV from somebody. Right? So, like Crossway had to actually go out and buy the rights from whatever publisher held the original RSV. And now they may choose to use some of it or not, but they now have the right to use it. And really, if you can use a version that's already out there, that saves you a lot of work. Okay, ESV published in 2001. By 2008, the study version topped 1 million sold. That's the one where you have all the notes on the bottom and headers in the beginning of each chapter that explain what's going on and maps and timelines and stuff like that. 1 million sold. And since then, here we go again. It's had difficulty relative to the inconsistent use of gender neutral language, slavery, and anti Semitism. We have a group of people, they're not the majority, but there is a significant group of people out there that they're going to complain if you hung them with a brand new rope.
They'll have God as woman.
Hmm?
They'll have God as a woman before it's over.
Yeah. Anyway, and they're going to push back, and they're going to try to convince people not to buy it. I want to hurt the profitability of the company that's publishing it. So, it's undergoing the same thing that everything else that touches God has pushback on. All right, which version's for me? There we go. If the Word of God is inspired and perfect, why all the versions? Why do we have all the versions? I can't read Greek, Hebrew, Aramaic. That's why. So I need at least one translation just to get it to English. We start with 2 questions, level and purpose. The reading level that's appropriate for you and the job you want to do. The reading level is going to be a continuum, a range from new Christians that don't know a whole lot, young people, people that are reading the English Bible as a secondary Spanish language coming in. And on the other end of the spectrum is the advanced, the study, the classic multilingual. So you need to figure out where on that spectrum you're looking for. Am I looking for an easy read, or am I getting into the details? The second question is the purpose. Am I looking for a Bible that I can read for awareness, casual stories? I'm going to talk to my kids about Bible stories and parables. I don't need the ESV to do that. I can go to the NLT to do that. On the other extreme, there's study Bibles and people that specialize in exegesis and hermeneutics, like I do, okay? That's where you really get into the meanings of the words. So once you know the reading level that you need and the reading purpose that you're looking for, then you can go into the translation principles. The formal equivalence, that's the fancy name for the word for word. So word for word, retain the sentence structure, you have the lexical, syntax, context, and idioms, all correct. Now there's the ESV and the NASB. We have dynamic equivalence, which is the thought for thought. So I'm taking what the author back then was thinking and move it to today's author that is thinking. Not too much worried about word for word, but making sure the thought is carried over. Okay. And then the last one is the paraphrase. And the paraphrase it's just an easy read. I mean, literally, it's completely ignoring the original Greek and telling the story in your own words. So here's the version choice. You probably can't read too much of that, but all right. So here, over on the left-hand side, you got word for word. These are the Bibles that are, literally word for word. And way at the far left is what's called an interlinear. I'll show you an interlinear. That's literally English, Greek, same page. NASB, ESV, KJV. So these are over here in the word for word. In the middle, thought for thought, you've got the NRSV, the NIV. These are the thoughts for thought. And over on the far side, you get the paraphrase, and that's where your New Living Translation, yeah. Some of these Bibles are really. Have you ever heard of the Cotton Patch Bible? Cotton Patch Bible? That's over here on the paraphrase side. That's like, I want to pray to the big daddy, the little daddy, and the spook. Okay. But it's out there. It's out there. So what you need to do is you need to pick a version based on your two levels that you've decided on and decide which one's for you. Or just go ahead and invest in 3 Bibles. They're not that expensive. Get one for casual, relaxed reading. If you just want to sit down and read the story, read Matthew, read First Chronicles, I'm sure you just sit down and read that, but okay, so you get an easy reading Bible, get an NIV or an NLT. So you don't have to think about what really means. Then get one that matches your preacher's version. Because if he's going to be pulling quotes on you every Sunday, you need to be on the same page. Okay? And then a good formal equivalent study Bible, NASB or ESV, if you want to get into the dirt. If you want to get down into the weeds, here's where you need to go. Most people, if they're just average folks, all you need is the NIV. If you want to go to church and talk with your preacher, get his, and only if you want to get into the weeds, get down here. This church pretty much uses ESV. There's actually much easier ones, but by using the ESV, you killed like 3 points. The preacher's version, you can study from it without having to worry about it, and in 5 minutes, I'll show you how you can actually drive into the Greek for free. Questions or comments?
I appreciate your stance on it, and because you try to communicate to people, get on their level. I'm glad because there's conservative people around that will say that you only got to go by this word and you need to teach this word. But it seems like your goal is trying, and mine is too, when they try to be a light, people have to understand where they're at. So
You realize you defined my job again, apologist, to collect evidence, analyze it using reason and logic, and put out the pros and cons for you to decide. Now, if you want to ask my opinion, we'll go have coffee. I'm not going to tell that to the whole class. I don't want to influence people. Okay? All right. Here's where it's neat. I mean, it's wonderful. If you've got an Android phone or an iOS phone, you can have all 3 hyperlinked and commentaried. Let me show you what I'm talking about. This is called the Olive Tree Bible app. There are several Bible apps out there, but this is the most powerful one, and it's free. If you have an iPhone or an Android phone, you can go out to either Google Play or go out to the App Store and search for Olive Tree Bible, and this app will pull up. This is the one that's on my phone, and I use it all day long. I'm sitting in church reading it. I'm in Sunday school classes reading it. It's everything I need is right there. It's got the ability to have multiple copies of different Bibles in it. Here's an example. My page of Bibles, okay? I've got the American Standard Version, English Standard Version with a reverse interlinear, Strong's Bible, Greek NT, Harmony of the Gospels, Hebrew Bible. I've got the Vulgate in Latin, I've got the Reina Valera in Spanish. I literally have about 16 different Bibles that I can choose from. And this app, if you get on one verse, and you put that verse on that screen and change Bibles, it'll go to that verse in the next Bible. So if you want to say, well, what does the NLT say? What does the ASV say? What is the, you can literally bounce from one to another and just go and swipe, and go back, and swipe, and go forward. It is neat. It's zero cost. Just download it for free. When you download it, you get about 8 or 10 Bibles for free. Now, I spent some big bucks and got more Bibles. Okay. What I like doing is getting a Bible that is linked to the Strong's Concordance. So if I click on a word, any word in the New Testament, it's going to bring up that word in the Greek in Strong's, tell me what it means, tell me how differently it's used. I think I may have had an example of that. Oh, let me jump this. Here's an interlinear. Remember I said this is the farthest to the left? Literally is, you can't read this, but it says, at that time Jesus went. Aikeanos kairos, Jesus paranamai. So you literally have the Greek right there. Okay? And if you're into that sort of stuff, there it is. This is the one I use whenever Marty talks. Go to Marty's class, pull up this one. He's going to be doing that. Here's clicking on a word. So I clicked on the word, if you see it, IPLES, disciples, the last of the word. I put the cursor on disciples, clicked on the thing. It says that disciples is mathetes, right? And there's the Greek word, mathetes. The dictionary definition, a disciple. And this particular word is used 26 times as a disciple, 233 times as disciples, plural, and 1 time as a disciple ownership, and 1 as a pupil. So if you got a verse that you're working with, you're trying to decide, I don't know, man, this mathetes, should I interpret this as a disciple or a pupil? There's about 270 one way and 1 the other way. Okay? Come on. Okay. It has to be really, really, really different to pick the one. And you can eliminate a lot of misinterpretations right there. Okay? So that's drilling down in. This is a Bible dictionary. I think this one cost me, I think this is like $3. The NIV linked to Strong's, the ESV interlinear, and the ESV linked to Strong's. I think they were $7 for the package. I can't buy a Bible in the store for that price, okay? I got maps. I got maps for days. It's free. Anyway, here's an example of a dictionary. Faith, Greek, pistis, and then literally a wonderful definition of what is faith and references to here's my maps. There's like 30 maps, all right? And what's really neat, this whole software package on your phone, Olive Tree Bible, they got a desktop version. So you download the same thing to your desktop. You can do everything you just did, but now you can print from it right off your desktop. Search for words and so forth and so on, pull up the maps and print them out, and save them in files, cut, copy, paste, write papers, build slides right off there. Now, if you're really, I'm going to take just a minute on this one. If you're really into the Greek, if you really want to understand the New Testament, here's another free program. There is a free version of the program called Logos. What does Logos mean? All right. The word. All right, so Logos is the program. They have a free version, which is like 10 times more stuff than I can ever figure out how to use. And they go up in various levels of more and more and more power, all the way up to I think it's $3,000. The only one I know that uses this is Marty. Okay. I'm down here in the free version. And this right here is basically where I do most of my study work if I'm trying to figure out what it says. I can have many panes up there. Each of these windows is called a pane. So right here I've got Matthew 6:9, Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be your name. All right. So here's the Lord's Prayer. If I click on that word Father, over here on this side, find it here. Hello. Right there. So here's the word for Father, Pater. All right. Pi alpha tau epsilon rho. So Pater is Father. As you click on a word over here, it highlights it on both sides. And as soon as you click on it, a window pops up down here that tells you everything you need to know about that verb or adjective or participle or anything. All of these different colors over here, I've got these things set up to show me verbs, adjectives, adverbs, participles, conjunctions, everything's right there.
Said you gotta buy that one.
$0. $0. Everything you see there, the only thing it cost me was about an hour and a half to download it.
So that program is Logos.
Logos. Yeah, logos.com. Now, they will send you once a week an email trying to sell you some more books. Okay? So you delete them, but once a month you get a free book. Okay? All right, I've run over time. Questions or, yeah. Questions or comments?
Scott, just one comment. I used to enjoy going to the Bible stores. Okay, it confused me like your class does some on all the different translations that were available in the Bible bookstores, but they're no longer around.